On this Live Life Well on the Digital Desk, we're talking about eating disorders. We'll answer some of your questions, and we're going to talk to a woman who tackled this very challenge. Joining us first today, though, is Stephanie Robbins, professional counselor with Burrell and a specialist in eating disorders. So maybe we ought to start out right away with the big, wide view here. What is an eating disorder?
So an eating disorder is any number of things that come up related to food and body image that really kind of interfere with daily functioning. So when somebody has a struggle with their intake, whether it's too much or not enough, or we see some behaviors associated with it, it's kind of a red flag for us that we've got a problem.
So most of us think of it in terms of anorexia or binge eating, but there's a wide range of eating disorders, correct?
Yes. There's also bulimia, and there is an eating disorder that's referred to as ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, that we see a lot in clients that have autism spectrum disorder or maybe sensory processing disorder. And so there's just some different aspects to each of them. One of the biggest eating disorders that we're seeing currently is called atypical anorexia, and it's where somebody will meet all of the criteria for anorexia and have the same behaviors, but they're not underweight medically. So they still are at risk for the same types of side effects, but doctors maybe aren't taking it as seriously.
And what are the signs of that?
With atypical anorexia, we're going to see a food restriction that's related to a dissatisfaction with how the body looks. And so we will often see a sharp drop in weight associated with that. That restriction can be food and water at times. And so we start to see some physical side effects associated with malnutrition.
And this relates to one of the questions a viewer sent in. If you're a parent, Vicki wants to know, what are the warning signs of an eating disorder? So maybe you can expand on what you've been telling me.
Yeah, so whether it's a child or an adult, the things that we're looking for as red flags is the way a person that you know eats changing? Are they eating different foods or all of a sudden cutting different foods out of their diet? And in addition to that, are they getting kind of isolative or secretive with what they're eating? Maybe they're not going to family functions where there's food, or making up excuses such as I ate earlier or I'm just not feeling well. And you start seeing that repeating as a pattern. Those are some really big red flags that something's happening.
Megan wants to know, is there an age group affected more than any other?
I would say no. A lot of times we see eating disorders start to have an onset in adolescence, and more we are seeing an onset later in life as well. And so we deal with lots of people who are between the 30 to 50 age range when their eating disorder first comes up for them.
A gender?
It's definitely more prevalent in females. But part of that is there's a lot of stigma with males in reporting eating disorders, so we feel like that's a little bit underreported, that there's probably more males struggling than we know about. So there's still a good amount of males who struggle, but females definitely have a higher occurrence.
And this might be a good time to hear from Allison. She is brave enough to come forward and talk to us, and she has been battling anorexia. When did you first realize you might have a problem?
At first, I did not even realize it. We thought I had like a stomach ulcer or something like that, and we went to multiple different places trying to figure out what the root of the issue was until we got to Burrell, and then we found out I had an eating disorder.
What was the diagnosis?
Anorexia, is it nervosa? Anorexia nervosa.
Okay, so what kind of things were happening in your life that told you had a problem?
I was losing weight. I didn't want to eat. I had zero appetite. I had no energy for anything. I didn't want to hang out with my friends. I didn't want to go to school. I just wanted to isolate, and that's how I started it off.
Did you reach out for help right away, or did you wait?
I did not reach out for help. right away. My mom actually reached out for help for me. She made me. I did not want to get help, but I didn't realize that I needed the actual treatment that I did until I got to Burrell, because I was in denial to some extent, and I didn't want to believe that I had an eating disorder because I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and I didn't want people to know that about me, and so I didn't want the treatment that they were offering at first.
What did that treatment look like that you didn't want?
IOP, am I allowed to say that? Mm-hmm. IOP, it's intensive outpatient clinic, and it's a lot, but it was very helpful because I got to stay in school, and I didn't have to go to a higher level of care where I would have to be away from my friends and my family for like however long. It was very helpful that I got to stay in school and stay in the area during treatment.
So what made the difference? You're at this point where you're like, I don't want this. This isn't for me. Was there one moment or a series of moments where you said, okay, this is the path I'm going to follow?
It happened probably after like 6 months of treatment that I finally gave in and understood that, okay, they are trying to help me. Everything is actually helping. I should take what they're giving me and apply it. And it is very helpful. And then, it kind of started to try to work on myself better, because I was trying and I was in the treatment, but I didn't want it still because I was in denial of the eating disorder still, and I didn't want to have something to fix.
Yeah. So take me back to that. I'm still trying to figure out, when does it's a process over 6 months. It's not like, boom, a light bulb goes off and this is it. No.
It just happened because I was going 4 days a week for a while, and then eventually it just kind of clicked, like, oh, I don't know. It's very hard to explain.
Yeah. So when you're entering this period, when you have anorexia, is there anything you think caused this or kicked it off, or a point when it really ramped up?
That I would not like to share, if that's okay.
No, that is your right to do that. I'm just curious because I'm trying to help other people relate to what you've learned through this process. So let me back up and say, what didn't work for you? What are the things where, maybe your parents came to you and said, we need to do X, Y, Z. Are there things along those lines other parents may see and go, ooh, I'm doing that. I shouldn't do that?
Yeah, I don't like really to be told what to do. And that, from my parents and them trying to pressure me into doing something that I didn't want to do. No. But all of the support from the whole recovered team at Burrell, I feel like that might have been the actual step to get me to finally actually recover. Just all of the support, because there's so much of it all at once.
So there was repetition, and the repetition
and it was
eventually
very consistent.
Consistent treatment.
Consistent treatment, and yeah.
So if there's a parent out there and they have a child going through this, what would you say the key word is? The word coming to me is patience, but
patience.
Is that the best word?
I would probably say patience, but also a little bit of tough love, because I know that I am stubborn, and I don't know. That's a good question.
Is this something that happens and it gets triggered and then you get treatment and you're done for life? Or is this something you're going to face for the rest of your life?
It is something I will probably face for the rest of my life, probably. But it is very well managed right now.
Yeah. So you need, and for other people who are going through this, you basically have to stay connected, either other people who've felt what you felt and gone through what you felt, or with some type of therapy to make sure you stay and don't diverge back.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
stay in it and stay consistent with everything that you're doing.
Is that hard to stay consistent?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
But all of the support throughout the whole time spent there, it made it well worth it.
And how long would you say you've been on a better path?
Probably for about 6 months.
Yeah.
I've been on a good upward trending path.
Yeah. And what kind of a difference does it make in your life to be at this point?
It makes like all of the difference in the world, actually, because I was not planning on going to college, and I'm in college now because my eating disorder was going to hold me back from going to college. But I got the treatment from them, and they allowed me to go to college.
So the message from you to other people who are facing this right now is what?
Accept the help that is offered to you, and don't try and fight it. And I don't know, there's a lot I could say.
You're free to say it.
I think having a program like the IOP program at Burrell would be like the best program to be in, because you get to stay in school, you get to hang out with your friends and family still, stay at home. You don't have to go to a higher level of treatment, but you still keep a very consistent and manageable treatment plan.
There's hope?
There's hope. There is hope.
So Allison talked about this intensive treatment where you can stay at home, you don't have to go into a facility. Does that generally work better for most people, or do some people really need to be in a facility?
If somebody is medically unstable, they really need to be in a facility. The problem in the Springfield area is you have to travel to either Kansas City, St. Louis, or Tulsa for that level of care. So what's unique about our program is that with that intensive outpatient care that we have, that's the highest level of care that you can get in this area. So we're offering that to people. People like Allison traditionally would have needed more care than an outpatient therapist could have handled, and she would have needed to go into a facility. But because we were able to have that intensive treatment, she was able to stay home. And there is research supporting if you can stay with one team throughout your treatment process, you're going to have a better outcome rate, and you're going to be out of services faster, and the recovery rates are higher.
Because if you change your therapist, you have to build the trust again,
Yes,
correct?
Correct. And anytime that you go into a residential treatment facility, you work with their staff. So you would work with their therapist, their dietitian, their psychiatrist, and medical doctor while you're in the program.
So what we're talking about relates to Cody's question. I'm going to ask another viewer question here. Any specific methods that help people who have eating disorders or emotionally eat?
So what we like to do is help people work on what's the root cause and what are the emotions that you're avoiding by using your eating disorder. Because an eating disorder is essentially a coping skill. And so we like to help them understand, how is this working for you right now, and what are the ways that it's not working, so that we can give you a better coping skill to put in its place.
Another thing I asked Allison about was her parents.
Yes.
So parents are going to play a role if it happens to be a young man or woman.
Yes.
But there's a fine line there between pushing them to get help when you recognize they need help and pushing too far. How does a parent handle that? It sounds very tricky.
It is very tricky. And so we ask the parent to trust the team. When they come into eating disorder treatment, there's an entire team of providers that is working with them. We want to empower parents to be the parent and not to be the food police, so they can trust their team with those food recommendations and what we need to be doing from a recovery standpoint. And we ask the parents to really support the child through the process.
So don't be the parent who hovers over the child and says, I know you have this problem, you haven't had enough protein today.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, we would say, okay, if you're concerned that your child hasn't had enough protein, reach out to her dietitian, reach out to her therapist and say, I have a concern about this. How can we work it into her meal plan?
Yeah.
And that's very helpful. Parents report all the time being relieved to not have to be the food police for their child because it causes a disruption in their relationship.
But it also must be very hard.
Yes.
You care about your child, right? So you
Yes.
want to help them.
Yeah, there can be lots of power struggles. And a lot of times the eating disorder is about control. And so when parents come in and try to control their child's just going to push back against it because ultimately they're trying to be in control themselves.
So this is another viewer question, and we've covered this somewhat. It is, in general, what does work for families to get their loved one to take the first step to get help? In Allison's case, she mentioned that her mother took the first step and she
Yes.
resisted.
Yes.
So in general, what's your advice to a family? They're not in treatment yet. They recognize that they have a loved one who is facing an eating disorder.
Right. I would say that is the first step is the one where we need families and loved ones to be a little more assertive in saying, this is really what you need and we want to support you however we can, but we need you to do this. Because most of the time that's how we get someone in the door and we can help them. Just like Allison talked about being in denial. Maybe they're not understanding all the ways that this eating disorder is really interfering with their life and their functioning. And we can step in and help them kind of see how it's not working for them so we can give them some tools.
Right. Any other thoughts on this topic that I'm not asking you? Any questions I'm not asking you? You think I should have the answers to, or our viewers should have the answers to?
I think one of the primary things that people don't know about eating disorders is lots of medical staff, the vast majority are not trained to deal with this. So when we are sending people in for medical treatment, whether it's at their primary care physician's office or an urgent care emergency room setting, a lot of times those medical providers are invalidating the work that we're doing by saying, well, your labs are fine, or I don't think that you might be malnourished, but that's probably not related to your potassium being low, which to you and I kind of doesn't sound reasonable, but this literally happens every single week. And so what we're trying to do is an initiative to help medical providers know where to come to ask the questions. If they don't know exactly what they're looking at, we can provide resources to help them understand a little bit more about eating disorders.
All right. Stephanie, thanks for joining us on this Live Life Well on the Digital Desk.